Elizabeth Pena and Jennifer Erkman were out together Thursday night, and that's the last time anyone remembers seeing them.
She just told me she was gonna go home, and she never got home. And it's just been a search ever since. We've been passing these posters out everywhere.
Well, last thing is, I love you, and
Yeah, we both told her that we both love her and that we would see her, but we never got to see her again.
The search for two people missing for 3 days has apparently ended in tragedy this evening. This afternoon, authorities found the nude bodies of two teenage girls in North
Even in a
Houston.
city where a case of homicide no longer has a numbing effect on those who hear about it, this case is a real gut-wrencher. So many questions, not the least of which is what killed those children? Who could have done such a terrible thing?
Was Peter a follower or a leader?
I don't think he was a leader.
Have you ever watched like a show like on National Geographic?
Questioning at least 5 suspects.
It's similar to what lions do to gazelles.
Police have filed capital murder charges against teenage boys.
Jenny and Elizabeth were the gazelles, and I'll just leave it like that.
In positively the wrong place at the wrong time.
This is horrible. Absolutely horrible.
You can't script a president of the United States intervening. You can't script that the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals would use this case to decide whether the lethal injection constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. You can't script the Supreme Court would decide 17-year-olds don't know that you shouldn't kill somebody. You can't script the impact that these two families have had on victims' rights.
Why can't they put a belt around their neck? Why can't they stop them down with their feet like that, stomp them down the ground till they're dead? And why not lay them there for an hour and let them die?
I can still remember that day. It just took so much for me.
Introduce yourself and how you're related to this case.
My name is Venancio Medina Jr. I was the 14-year-old kid that was involved in this case.
Just broke my heart, and a piece of me is not here anymore. It's with, part of me is still with my daughter.
It's just, still hard to believe that happened and it's been that long.
Houston's T.C. Jester Park in daylight, a haven for runners and cyclists. 30 years ago, it was a shortcut for two innocent teenaged girls, and what happened next not far from here was unspeakable. This is the story of Jennifer Erkman and Elizabeth Pena. On June 24th, 1993, they crossed paths with what those involved in these cases have called pure evil.
Yeah, so this was at Waltrip in the gym. I'm wearing my gym shirt, she's not, but. And this was right before the end of our freshman year.
May 1993, 14-year-old Jennifer Erkman and 15-year-old Christina Alvarez were finishing up their first year at Waltrip High School.
We were just hanging out in gym.
They were best friends who lived close to each other, and their friendship went back years.
She was funny, fun to be around, super sweet. She was obsessed with New Kids on the Block, of course, like we all were. So her room was full of posters.
That freshman year, the two welcomed Elizabeth Pena into their group. She was a little older, but in the same grade, and had attended a different middle school. They all soon clicked.
Super sweet, yeah, very nice. Always happy, always smiling.
They were typical teenaged girls. Christina remembers Jennifer, a rule follower, a good student. Elizabeth, always with a big smile. She was Melissa and Adolph Pena's oldest child.
Pretty much carefree, she loved life and her friends and like going to the beach, getting her nails done, all things little teenage girls like to do. talk on the phone.
The Peñas were happy the girls had found each other. Jennifer was a good influence. She was an only child, and her parents were strict, but they trusted her. On June 24th, 1993, the girls were invited to hang out with friends at an apartment complex in the neighborhood. By this time, Christina and her family had moved farther away.
According to my mom, I was supposed to go. They wanted me to go, but she didn't let me go.
Jennifer and Elizabeth did go. They had an 11:30 p.m. curfew. Elizabeth's parents dropped them off.
Well, last thing is, I love you, and
Yeah, we both told her that we both love her and that we would see her, but we never got to see her again.
On June 24th, 1993, 14-year-old Jennifer Ertman and 16-year-old Elizabeth Peña were enjoying some summer freedom. It was a hot Thursday night. They were getting together with friends at a nearby apartment. Elizabeth's parents drove them there.
I remember her and I dropped her off, and for some odd reason, she didn't call us to come pick her up. It was about midnight, I guess, close to. And she decided to walk home. That was the worst mistake she ever made.
Trying to beat an 11:30 p.m. curfew, the girls took a shortcut through T.C. Jester Park. It was late and mostly deserted. They needed to get to the train trestle over White Oak Bayou. It would save some time.
And they took what they thought was a shortcut. And that shortcut was a shortcut into what I would call a modern-day Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
18-year-old Peter Cantu was running the initiation of 17-year-old Raul Villarreal into what was called the Black and White Gang. They were also in T.C. Jester Park drinking and fighting. As part of the initiation, Villarreal was to take on several gang members. Derek Sean O'Brien, Jose Medellin, his younger brother Venancio Medellin, and Efren Perez were also there. Less than an hour later, the girls crossed their path, and what would follow was horrific.
If you ever watched like a show like on National Geographic, it's similar to what lions do to gazelles. And Jenny and Elizabeth were the gazelles, and I'll just leave it like that.
Elizabeth was the first to be attacked. Later testimony revealed Jose Medellin grabbed her and threw her to the ground. Jennifer could have gotten away, but instead ran to help her friend.
It was so hard when I found that out and when I read that, because of course I was like, that's so her, but why? Why didn't you go and get help, and maybe you could both still be here, but.
The girls were raped for more than an hour, but the horrific sexual assault wasn't enough. Peter Cantu decided they had to die.
And then you're going to take them back there and kill them. And they had to work hard to do that. By strangulation wasn't good enough. It didn't work to make sure. Then they stomped on them, stomped on their throats, put their shoes on their throats. From Peter, I know what he did best because I heard it so many times. But kicking Elizabeth Peña in the face and the jaw with his steel-toed boots, and then stomping on Jennifer Ertman's neck to make sure they were dead.
The teen boys then went back to Cantu's house and divided up the spoils, money and jewelry. Jose Medellin took Jennifer's ring with the initial E to give to his girlfriend Esther, and they bragged to Cantu's older brother and his wife about what they did.
And they were listening to this horrific story, what they did to these you-know-what, and I got them, I got this, I got that, and we had to take them out. We didn't need any witnesses. They even took trophies, a little Mickey Mouse watch, showing what they did. We're going to be on the news. And luckily, they had a conscience.
Jennifer and Elizabeth's parents couldn't find them, and that was unusual.
It was like, okay, if they're spending the night, they should have called. And then, no word.
After reporting them missing to police, Jennifer's father, Randy Ertman, made missing persons flyers. The Ertmans and Peñas had an army of the girls' friends to pass them out. Their search was desperate, and every hour that passed took away any remaining hope.
She just told me she was going to go home, and she never got home.
I don't know. I guess we all knew it was going to be something bad.
By the third day, prodded by his wife, Peter Cantu's brother called Crime Stoppers of Houston to anonymously report the location of the girls' bodies. His wife later testified she was afraid of Peter Cantu, and she and her husband had watched the news coverage on the searches and wanted to give the parents peace. 4 days after Jennifer and Elizabeth's brutal killings, their tortured, decomposing bodies were found by patrol officers in a secluded, wooded area.
I didn't even think there were bodies.
Houston Police Homicide Detective Ray Zaragoza was called to the park.
Well, we were up north on a case, and then it was around noontime, and I received a call, and it was at T.C. Jester Park. And I remember it was hot that day, really hot. And so, my partner and I, we drove over there, and then we see this crowd, large crowd, and helicopters.
As word spread, people started gathering. This was the news the community feared would come. They were scared and shocked that 2 teen girls could just vanish. Soon they would see a father's pain on full display, raw and angry. The city would also see it captured by television news cameras.
And I don't think anybody in Houston will ever forget Randy barreling down there and screaming, and HPD officers having to hold him back. I don't think anybody will forget that.
It seemed like he was wanting to go somewhere. And then finally he wanted to go see if that was his daughter over there. And so I came in behind him, because that's the way I came at the time, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and he turned around. I thought he was going to hit me. He put his fist up. I said, wait. And then we talked a little bit, calmed him down a little bit, and told him what he needed to do.
The detective diffused the situation. The parents' suffering was just beginning.
I can still remember that day. It just took so much for me. Just broke my heart, and a piece of me is not here anymore. It's with part of me is still with my daughter. I'll never ever forget that day. I'm sorry.
On a hot Houston night, Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Peña never could have predicted the evil they'd happen upon.
To this day, it just bothers me. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that humans, especially kids, could do that. But I guess that's the way it is. That's evil. That's evil.
As the girls were cutting through T.C. Jester Park in order to make curfew, they were attacked by gang members, raped and strangled. When a belt broke, they used shoelaces to choke them to death and then stomped and kicked them with steel-toed boots. 4 days later, police were led to their mutilated bodies by a call to the Crime Stoppers tip line. Further information led them to the gang members.
We hit them around 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, all at the same time.
Detective Ray Zaragoza and his partner were given the arrest warrant for 18-year-old Peter Cantu. He was considered the ringleader. They found evidence from the crime in his room.
We go to his room, there he is on the bed, and we arrest him at the time. And then, we're looking around, and in plain sight, on top of a dresser, we see all this jewelry and rings.
Jennifer's goofy watch that her parents had given her, her necklaces and rings, and Cantu's steel-toed work boots were in his room. 17-year-olds Efren Perez and Raul Villarreal, 18-year-old Jose Medellin and his 14-year-old brother Venancio, and 18-year-old Derek Sean O'Brien were also arrested in coordinated operations that morning. Police later learned O'Brien had returned to the crime scene.
I remember telling the crime scene unit at the time, because I'd watched TV and I'd watched the detective things. And I remember saying that usually the criminals are always at the scene after something happens. And I remembered that. And I told the crime, I said, can you take a picture of everybody that's on the railroad tracks, stuff like that? I said, okay. Well, later on we found out O'Brien was up there, you know, and I said, wow, I guess it is true that they hang around like that, you know. So that's how we found out about him. He was up there laughing.
O'Brien wasn't laughing when he and 3 of the 6 suspects were walked back to jail after their initial arraignment. He kept his head down. Peter Cantu, the alleged ringleader, was not as measured. He lashed out at reporters and photographers, an outburst that showed his age and his anger.
I think he was proud of what he did. He was they were all such evil people, is all I can say. Who in their right mind would do anything like that? You had to be evil.
Six teenage boys ranging in age from 18 to as young as 14 were arrested a day after the remains of Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena were found. But justice would not come easy. What seemed like a slam dunk for convictions took many twists and turns. The murders struck fear into the community.
This case is a real gut wrencher.
They were just walking home, not even that far away. And somebody has to do that to them. Why, you know?
Definitely didn't want to go out, didn't want to, you know, didn't feel safe anywhere.
And in a city numb to daily violence, the girls' deaths hit differently.
And you had visual images of the pain on the parents, and because they became everybody's daughter. And it just hit home with everybody.
These are kids, and you're thinking, how does this happen? You know, we've had bad crimes in Houston. We had a lot of bad crimes in Houston while I was a prosecutor as well as a judge, but nothing compared to this.
So offensive that even other inmates made their disapproval known by marking the suspects' jail jumpsuits with slurs. Prosecutor Don Smith would soon be strategizing for trial.
I was off at Boy Scout summer camp with my troop, and I got a call from my investigator that says, "You won't believe what happened," and it fell in our division.
Out in the community, people gathered for vigils and at memorials in honor of the 2 murdered girls. The Ertmans and Penas almost always attended. The outpouring of sympathy was comforting.
Oh my God, we got letters from all over the world, people with their condolences telling us that they were sorry for what happened.
Hundreds of people paid their respects at the funerals. Jennifer was laid to rest first, followed by Elizabeth the next day. Coincidentally, they are buried at the same cemetery within sight of each other. For Adolph Pena, some memories never fade.
I remember the last time we took her to a beach. We went to Florida, and for some odd reason, it was not long after that she got killed. And for some odd reason, I can still see her face in the back seat of that van when we were coming home. And I don't know why, I'll always remember that. She had such a good time at the beach with all our friends, and I'll never forget that. In the rearview mirror, the look on her face, she was just so happy.
Peter Cantu, charged with...
Within 7 months, the case against Peter Cantu was going to trial, and the others weren't far behind. It was unprecedented. Venancio confessed and agreed to testify against all the defendants except his brother. He was not charged in connection with Elizabeth's rape and was given a 40-year sentence for sexually assaulting Jennifer, the maximum sentence allowed for a juvenile in Texas. But there was a catch that didn't sit well with Jennifer's parents. Just before he turned 18, a judge could transfer him to adult prison or release him on parole. He remains in prison today. He was the state's key witness.
What do you think would have been fair? What do you think would have been? He told the story to me and gave the written confession because he was genuinely remorseful of what happened. And he was important to our case because he's the only one that as far as I know, that Peter Cantu said, look, you know, Vinny, you can't go with us back into the woods. We're gonna have to kill him. You stay out here, you're too young to see that.
Venancio Medellin testified against everyone except his older brother, Jose. With their star witness secured, the state needed more background on Peter Cantu. He was the first defendant to go to trial.
So we had to go back and dig it off. So you go through everything and, start finding juvenile records, go to their schools, talk to the principals, school teachers, anybody that, any follow-up, any lead on what kind of person, has he been a danger to the community all his life or not.
And what did you find about Peter Cantu?
Oh, we found, Peter's life of crime began back in elementary school.
According to testimony, Cantu assaulted a female teacher and then bullied her. He had been kicked out of school, he was already on probation for assault, and he had his parents fooled.
Was Peter a follower or a leader?
I don't think he was a leader.
He no doubt in my mind, he was a ring leader. He was a kind of a dominating personality with them.
It all came to a head on that hot summer night in the park. Smith knew what his final argument would be well before a jury was ever seated.
The girls, they never got to graduate from high school, senior prom, go off to, if they were going to go to college and try to be what they were going to be, get married, have a wedding, raise children, have their own child, give their parents a grandchild. They never had a chance to do any of that.
Brother Joe.
Most days the courtroom was packed, the hallway overflowing. There were the Ertmans and Peñas, their supporters, and even the girls' friends and teachers from Waltrip High School.
What you're seeing is the death of young girls, but what you're seeing is the death of a family as well. It's gut-wrenching for the Ertmans and the Peñas to sit through this.
The testimony was grueling. The two fathers, Randy Ertman and Adolph Peña, often sought comfort in each other. Gut-wrenching details of how Jennifer and Elizabeth suffered were just too much to bear. The crime scene photos were worse.
I never looked at any of the photos, and even just hearing the testimony, that was bad enough.
State District Judge Bill Harmon presided.
And what was your impression of Peter Cantu?
He was a very, very violent individual.
Harmon denied a defense request for a change of venue, reasoning even with all the pretrial publicity, potential jurors only knew the victims' names and faces.
There were 5 adult defendants and 1 juvenile defendant, so they didn't really know those names.
Cantu would break a smile as he entered the courtroom and would often scribble in a notebook. His defense team had to manage him.
Yeah, we're worried about him behaving during trial. Here's that famous incident where he kicks at the cameraman, when he's being led in and out of a jail. And we always sort of use that as an example of what not to do. I don't care what anybody says to you or how you feel about the testimony. All you can do is just be neutral, be calm, and not give them a reason to be mad at you in the courtroom. So, yeah, we had that as a constant concern.
The defense didn't call a single witness. The evidence against Cantu was overwhelming and even included testimony from his own brother, describing how Cantu and the others bragged about the girls' murders.
We didn't have an alibi. We didn't have self-defense. We didn't have some of the traditional defenses that you might have, so we just had to put the state to their proof. And in all honesty, the defendant's family coming in to testify, made it difficult. So if what we were really concerned about was trying to keep from getting the death penalty, we couldn't lose our credibility in the guilt-innocence phase by taking some, outlandish position.
Eyewitness News reporter Elma Barrera has been following every gripping moment of the trial, and she's joining us live now from the Harris County Courthouse with the verdict.
After 4 days of trial and less than 30 minutes of deliberation, there was a verdict.
We, the jury, find defendant Peter Anthony Cantu guilty of capital murder charge.
Randy Ertman sobbed.
I know he's going to be put away. They should seek the death penalty on him, and he should get it. He should try.
Look at me.
The drama was yet to come. 5 adult defendants charged with capital murder, and 1 had already been convicted less than a year after Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena were raped, strangled, and stomped to death.
Who in their right mind would do anything like that? You had to be evil.
The question was whether Peter Cantu would be sentenced to die.
My job is to administer justice.
And do you think it was done in the Peter Cantu case?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It took 4 hours for the jury to return a death sentence.
I think he always knew that he was going to get the death penalty.
But first, Judge Harmon made an unprecedented offer.
He goes, what do you think if, when the jury comes back with a decision, if I allow Mr. Ertman to say a few words? And I just went, I think he would love that.
And I asked each one of them if they wanted to have an opportunity to make a statement before I imposed the sentence, and Randy Ertman said he did, and Adolph Pena said he did not.
Mr. Ertman.
The weight and emotion of Randy Ertman took over the courtroom.
We didn't know what was going to happen.
In a booming voice, he berated Peter Cantu.
Yes, sir, I do. You know, there's a lot of children back here, and I'm going to put myself down to your level. I'm not going to call you sir, I'm not going to call you a fag. You can look at me if you want. Look at me! Look! You're not even an animal. You know I have cats that kill animals? They kill an animal, they eat it. You're worse than that. You're... Excuse me. Look at me. Look at me good.
Those excruciating moments in the courtroom in 1994 made way for future victim impact statements in Texas.
You destroy your life, you destroy my life, you destroy my wife's life, you destroy...
His, credited with being the first, the Penas believe that day Ertman said it all. Today, such statements are standard procedure at the end of a trial.
You're worse than anything I've ever seen in my life. And I hope to God, and this is wrong too, that you rot in hell. Do you understand that? Just nod your head if you can even think about talking, boy.
It was just the right thing to do at that particular time in that particular case with that particular father.
He was a force of his own.
He was something else. Randy Ertman was something else.
With Peter Cantu convicted and sentenced to die, Derek Sean O'Brien, a 9th grade dropout with a criminal history, was next up. But before the April 1994 trial began, Houston police said they linked him to another brutal crime.
We found out that he was implicated in another murder of Patricia Lopez.
Patricia Lopez was a 27-year-old mother of 2 children. Her partially nude body was found in another Houston park in January of 1993, 6 months before Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena were murdered. Lopez had been stabbed and her throat slit. According to police, they found a beer can with O'Brien's fingerprints at the scene and later discovered, they say, that Jose Medine's DNA matched DNA found on Lopez's body. While no one was charged with her murder, prosecutors presented those details during sentencing in O'Brien and Medine's trials for the murders of Jennifer and Elizabeth. The autopsy indicated Lopez, small in stature, tried to fight off her attackers.
This was nothing new to them. They had done it before.
O'Brien, who is now 19, was found guilty of capital murder. It took less than 30 minutes for the jury to sentence him to death, the second of the 6 suspects to be condemned. Elizabeth's parents thought it was too easy.
Why can't they put a belt around their neck? Why can't they stop them down with their feet like that, stomp them down the ground till they're dead? And why not lay them there for an hour and let them die?
14-year-old Venancio Medine pleaded guilty to aggravated sexual assault of Jennifer Ertman. He testified against everyone except his brother, and as a juvenile was sentenced to 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole when he turned 18. 18-year-old Peter Cantu, the ringleader, was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to die, as was Derek Sean O'Brien. It was then decided for convenience that Jose Medine, Efren Perez, and Raul Villarreal would be tried at the same time in the same courthouse, but in different courtrooms with different judges and juries. This so that witnesses wouldn't have to keep coming back.
The last 3, they ran simultaneously, and so we were all split up in different courtrooms. I went to Medellin. I think you were in Villarreal.
Villarreal,
and
yes.
then Randy and Sandy were in Perez. In the whole scheme of things, to get it done in one week, it made it easier on probably us as victims and, you know, the prosecutors and just all the people that had testified, to have them there and, you know, just go from one courtroom to another and just get it all done.
While the grisly details were confined to the courtroom, the tension spilled over into the courthouse hallways.
You belong in hell. We live for the day that you die.
Medellin, Perez, and Villarreal were all convicted. That was the given, according to courthouse observers.
Hope you rot in hell.
Whether they would get the death penalty was the real question. The 5 who were eligible did.
And in modern day crime history, that is the most death penalties ever in a singular criminal incident, still to this day.
The sentences were victories, but they wouldn't stand forever.
We had that sentence, and then it's like, nope, took it away.
That was terrible.
Six teenagers, 5 adults under Texas law, and 1 juvenile. By October of 1994, they were on their way to prison. The 5 adults with death sentences, the juvenile with a 40-year term. In just 16 months, justice for Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena, 2 sweet and beautiful teens who suffered in their last moments, had been served, and their parents thought the courthouse was behind them. Andy Kahn is a longtime crime victims advocate who worked for the city of Houston at the time. He befriended and often spoke for the girls' families.
I still cringe to this day. It's still the worst case I've ever dealt with, read, or had privy to be on the inside to, still to this day.
We think that these girls happened along and that they were in positively the wrong place at the wrong time.
The murders of Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena shook Houston. The winding road to justice was frustrating. With convictions, Jennifer's father, Randy Ertman, turned his attention to when the sentences would be carried out.
And he goes, hey, you know, I'd really like to be there when they execute these guys. Can I do that? And I say, and I pause and I say, trust me, he didn't say it so nicely or politely. And I probably cleaned up that entire sentence for him. But I stopped. I said, you know, that's a really good question. I said, let me look. Let me find out. So I go back and I look. And I find out that victims' families were specifically prohibited by policy. They, along with other inmates, were the only categories of people not allowed to witness an execution.
The Ertmans, Penas, and Kahn were determined to change that. They found a sponsor for a bill, and the next year they testified at a criminal justice committee hearing at the state capitol in Austin. But politics being as they are, the bill died due to behind-the-scenes infighting. Instead, Kahn found another way.
So I went into Plan B mode. All right, you wouldn't pass the dang law. I'm going to get the policy changed. I called the chairman of the Board of Criminal Justice at that time, Alan Polonsky, whom the death row unit is now named after. And I said, Alan, here's the situation. Here's the deal. He listened to me. He said, all right, I'm going to put you on the next Board of Criminal Justice meeting. You come down. And he did. The Ertmans, the Penas, and myself drove down to Corpus Christi, testified in front of the 9-person board. They voted unanimously to change the policy.
But it would be years before the Ertmans and Peñas would witness anything. And in legal blows to the victims' families, the executions of Efren Perez and Raul Villarreal would never come.
I just don't think they deserve to be alive. I really don't. For what they did to my Elizabeth.
In 2005, more than 11 years after Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Peña were murdered, the Supreme Court in another case, Roper versus Simmons, ruled that executing a person under 18 at the time he or she committed a murder would be a violation of the defendant's constitutional rights. The decision applied to all 17-year-olds who had been convicted of murder, so the sentences for Perez and Villarreal were commuted from death to life with the possibility of parole. Life without parole did not become an option in Texas until later that year. Perez and Villarreal are eligible for parole in the year 2029.
We're totally against, them being released early. They were sentenced and they need to do their sentence and, in full.
The next month, the victims' families were confronted with another obstacle. Jose Medellin claimed since he was a Mexican national, he should have had a representative from the Mexican consulate by his side after his arrest. The Supreme Court agreed to hear his case, only to dismiss it 2 months later. His execution seemed on track until President George W. Bush, the former governor of Texas, intervened and ordered hearings for all 51 Mexican nationals on death row, including Medellin. Later, the Supreme Court said the president overstepped his authority.
I mean, when you think about it, this was not some ordinary appeal. This went all the way up to the president of the United States, who is now intervening in a death penalty case. That doesn't happen. To my knowledge, it's never happened. It'll happen in a federal case maybe, but this is a state case.
In 2006, Derek Sean O'Brien was the first to be executed. The Ertmans and Peñas, who pushed for the right to be witnesses, were there, along with Sergeant Zaragoza.
And, what everybody says about how wrong it is and stuff like that, and how what animalistic it is, it's not like that. They just go to sleep.
And how do you think that is compared to what happened to the girls?
Oh, they got it out easy on that one. Poor girls had to suffer. And I mean suffer, too.
But O'Brien was the only one who gave what Adolph Peña thought at the time was a heartfelt apology. And that same year, Peter Cantu got his execution date from trial judge Bill Harmon.
He was brought before me in the 178th. Obviously hadn't seen Cantu since 1994. This was 12 years later. And in my opinion, he was just as deserving of the death penalty in 2006 as he was deserving in 1994. And so I set his execution date and he was executed.
In 2010, 17 years after the crimes, Cantu, the angry ringleader who decided the girls would have to die, was executed.
It just made you feel a little bit at ease, that somebody that killed your daughter is no longer alive. That's just relieves me.
His trial attorney believes Cantu was misunderstood. His actions, the product of his age and environment. As federal judge Keith Ellison alluded to, Morrow points out, in deciding his habeas petition, which was denied.
He had time to grow and become a man and reflect on what he'd done. And I think he was very remorseful.
In the end, he had only one last word.
And I asked Cantu, do you have any last words, anything you'd like to say? And I will never forget. He looks up to the ceiling like I'm doing that, and he goes, nah. Just like that, nah.
Cantu's the last of the executions. 2 years earlier, and after his last-minute appeals were rejected, Medellin was executed. The Peñas and Ertmans had made 3 trips to the Texas death chamber. The Ertmans did not stop for interviews afterward.
On a personal level, it's frustrating as a family member to know that this man has lived 15 years behind bars, almost as long as my cousin was alive before he ended her life. That's frustrating, yes.
O'Brien, Medellin, and Cantu are buried in Captain Joe Byrd Cemetery in Huntsville, the largest prison cemetery in the state of Texas, and for prisoners whose families won't claim them.
They were bad. and they weren't going to get any better. I mean, you never forget, but, you know, you have to move on.
For 30 years, Melissa and Adolph Pena have learned to live without their oldest daughter, Elizabeth.
She's still part of our life, even if she's not here.
Their 2 younger children kept them going.
We still had things we had to do. You know, got to get up, take the kids to school. You know, there's after-school activities, there's this and there's that.
But for Sandra and Randy Ertman, Jennifer was all they had.
The Ertmans had worked so hard to have a child, and they had a child, pretty beautiful young girl, 14 years old, and that was the end of the line. I mean, that branch on that tree doesn't go any further.
They never hid their pain. Instead, they and the Penas harnessed it for change.
2 things, positive things, you know, spurred on from the Ertman-Pena case, and that's victim impact statements and, you know, the ability to witness executions. They're responsible for that, and that will be here by the time way before I'm gone and whatever. That will always be here, and they did it.
It was time, you know, that victims' families were just not ignored, and, you know, that we have a say-so in things now. You know, it helps to have a voice.
No other case has given victims more rights in Texas.
My name is Venancio Medin Jr. I was the 14-year-old kid that was involved in this case, you know, 30 years ago.
So you're 44 now.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a long time.
Yes.
Venancio Medin has spent 3 decades in prison and for the first time agreed to an interview.
Maybe people can see that, you know, I'm not the 14-year-old kid that I was back then, that at some point I turned into a man and I grew up.
He said that fateful night in June was the first time he had ever hung out with his brother Jose Medin and his friends.
I mean, we were all guilty.
He confessed to aggravated sexual assault of Jennifer Ertman and testified against everyone except his brother.
Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you try to get help?
So we were pretty much in a secluded area. So I didn't really become assertive with it, with the idea of leaving, because at the same time, even though I wanted to be accepted by my brother and his friends, I also was intimidated. I was afraid that they might turn on me. I remember when like Raul, Sean, they put a belt around one of the girls, like her neck, and I started seeing that. And one of the other girls was taken further back into the woods, so I couldn't see them. But I do remember seeing, you know, that part.
And at the time, what was your reaction?
I was frozen. I was stuck. You know, I couldn't do nothing. You know, I wasn't going to step in then, because then for surely I thought they would turn on me.
I mean, Jennifer was your same age.
Yes, she was. And you know, I understand that it's hard to express sometimes, because anything that I say that I feel that might be a sad feeling or a negative feeling or a negative thought, you know, is dwarfed by what Jennifer and Elizabeth went through. So it's almost like what I felt or thought, it's nothing, you know, because they felt the pain, they felt the hurt and the loneliness of that night and everything. It's amplified compared to what I felt or feel currently. But still, I would want to express that I'm sorry for what happened. But I can't take it back. I wish that I could, but I cannot. Associate's degree, by the way.
Medellin brought his certificates for a GED and an associate's degree. He is an artist at the prison and is proud of his airbrushing skills. This mural is in the visitation room. He said he stayed away from gangs and prison tattoos because out of all of those involved, he is the only one who has an end date on his sentence.
If I didn't see that light at the end of the tunnel, even though that light was so far ahead, so far away that it was just a tiny little speck, you know, I knew that there was hope somewhere, at some point, you know. I didn't know when it was going to be. I still don't know when it's going to be, but the light is getting closer. And that's always kept me, you know, level-headed and always trying to do the right thing.
Venancio Medellin is housed at the same unit as Texas's death row. He was last denied parole in October of 2020. He will complete his full sentence in 2033. The Peñas are skeptical he can reintegrate and plan to fight any release. Efren Perez and Raul Villarreal, both 17 when they became killers, are now nearing 50 years old. They are eligible for parole in the year 2029.
What have they done that they deserve to be released early? I don't care if they're a model prisoner. They sure as hell weren't model citizens.
For 30 years, family and friends have lived with the memories of Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Peña, and they have honored them in their own ways.
Why did you want to name your daughter after Jennifer?
To keep her memory alive, to make sure that her parents knew that I was never gonna, forget about her.
Randy Ertman died in 2014 from lung cancer.
We bonded because we knew what the other was going through.
He was a protective father, fierce ally, and friend.
He was a force of his own.
He was something else. Randy Ertman was something else. He contributed so much to this case.
The horror that happened in the dark woods at a Houston park was unimaginable. The murders of Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Peña, one of the most notorious crimes in Texas history. Their innocent faces, unforgettable.
I hope that they'll always remember the two girls because they were innocent. They didn't deserve this. And I hope to God that people will always remember the two girls, Elizabeth and Jennifer.
What's your name? Andrew Yates. What's the problem? I just need him to come. Is your husband there? No. Well, what's the problem? Well, I need him to come. I need to know why we're coming, ma'am. Is he there standing next to you? Or she? Or me? Are you having disturbance? Are you ill or what? Yes, I'm ill. You need an ambulance? No, I need a police officer.
We're going to bring you some breaking news now out of the Clear Lake area. Houston police say they were called to check out a welfare scheme.
Has not been charged just yet. We do know that within the last couple of hours, it happened in the house you see behind me here. The father is a NASA engineer. Police say while he was at work, his wife drowned their 5 children.
You love your children.
Yeah, it's not in the right way, really.
Five precious children, one struggling mother. What Andrea Yates did on June 20th, 2001, inside her home stunned the nation. The then 36-year-old mother called 911 herself to report she had drowned her children. The years that followed were no less dramatic. An overturned conviction based on false testimony and a second trial that sent Andrea to a state hospital where she remains today. All of it shined a light on mental illness and exposed Andrea's demons that led to her children's deaths.
We get a call around 9:30, around about 9:30, 9:35, somewhere around there. A nice clear day, and nice day, and didn't expect that at all, of course, but you never do.
On the morning of June 20th, 2001,
she had breakfast on the table. They were eating cereal.
36-year-old Andrea Yates waited for her husband to leave for work, fed her children breakfast.
I checked, and the milk was cold.
And then one by one took them to the bathroom and drowned them.
I forgot how the call came in. I think it may have just came in as a, respond to the sick call, or I don't think it came in as I know it didn't come in as a drowning.
John Del Bosque.
I'm the paramedic who pronounced them.
A Houston firefighter, paramedic for 36 years, responded.
There was a police officer that may have beaten me there maybe about 5 minutes before I did. And as he walks out, first thing he says to me is, she killed all of them. And when he said that, I had no idea. I thought maybe mom, dad, husband, family, no idea of what he meant by that. So I walked in, and that's when I found the 4 kids in the bedroom, all lined up. She had covered them. She didn't cover their heads, just up to their neck, and you can see all their faces. And they looked like, to me, they looked like little porcelain dolls.
4 children, 5-year-old John, 3-year-old Paul, 2-year-old Luke, and 6-month-old Mary, who was cradled in John's arm, all dead. Del Bosque thought they had been poisoned. 7-year-old Noah was still in the bathroom.
As I was walking out, I saw a trail of water. And when I saw the trail of water, I kind of followed it, and it led into the bathroom. And that's where I saw the oldest child. I believe that was Noah, if I can remember correctly. And he was still in the bathtub, face down. He was just bobbing in the water. That's when I realized she drowned him. So yeah, that was that day. Seeing 5, deceased kids, babies, it was pretty difficult. It was pretty difficult to see that. So yeah, it's probably, obviously it was my worst call, I think. Yeah.
It happened in
For
the
most
house
of us,
you
it
see
is
behind me.
Soon media and more police descended on the 900 block of Beachcomber in Clear Lake, Texas, southeast of Houston.
Killed her children.
The children's father, Rusty Yates, rushed home. Del Bosque remembers his brief conversation with the woman whose actions would dominate headlines.
She was on the couch, sitting on the couch, and I believe that officer had her in handcuffs, and she was just sitting on the couch, just kind of glaring at the wall, real like in a gaze, or haze, just like a little zombie, just had no clue what she did, because she had no tears or anything like that. And we made small talk. She had a bus out back, and I asked her, I really didn't ask her, I go, man, there's a bus out back. And she said, yeah, we used to live in it.
Andrea and Rusty, a NASA engineer, were married in 1993. Children soon followed. They wanted a big family. Rusty shared many home videos like these online as a memorial to his children. The family moved from the converted bus to this modest home after Luke was born. Andrea homeschooled them. Her mental state was deteriorating. In 1999, she had a mental breakdown, overdosed, and was hospitalized, the first of 4 hospitalizations in 2 years. One doctor advised against having more children. Then Mary came in late 2000.
I said, is anyone hurt? And she said, yes. And I said, who? And she said, the children.
Rusty quickly faced the cameras. A day after he lost all of his children, he clutched a family photo and voiced his support for Andrea.
She loved those kids.
Read up as much as I possibly could about women's mental health.
George Parnham had been hired as her attorney hours earlier, a referral from a lawyer who knew her family.
I just knew what it was about. So I hesitated to call him back. In the back of my mind, knowing that this would be a mind-changing event in my legal life and personal life. But I did, and I was right. And the next morning at 7:30, Andrea's mother, her 2 brothers, came into my office, hired me, And 20 years later, here we are talking about her.
Parham was not only her attorney, but a staunch advocate, and now like family.
She's like my daughter. Yep.
He educated himself about women's mental health and postpartum depression and went on the interview circuit.
It was important for me to try to level the playing field.
He remembers his first interaction with Rusty. It was at the Harris County Jail. Parham met Andrea that same day.
The depths of her illness was overwhelming to me. I remember so well looking and at her, and she had no pupils in her eyes. She didn't know why she needed a lawyer. She believed that Satan lived within her, and she, for the benefit of mankind, wanted to be executed so that the ruler, as it is so stated in the Bible, and realistically it's the governor of Texas, right, could execute Satan, and therefore she would be able to save the world from Satan.
In interviews with police, Andrea said she killed her children because she was not a good mother. She told a county psychiatrist she wanted to save them from Satan.
Why would Satan want you to do something that saves the children? Because the act would condemn you. Satan was interested in you and not the children?
There's no question but that, you know, Andrea's world at that time was her psychotic state. And when you're in a depths of psychosis, you make decisions based on that world that may otherwise not be an appropriate call.
A jury would eventually hear the case. Was Andrea Yates a murderer or just a very ill woman?
Either she knew right from wrong or she did not. And that's what we accomplished in the first trial, what we tried to do in the second trial.
Andrea Yates was unlike any defendant accused of such horrific crimes. She was first in her high school class, the captain of the swim team. She was a nurse, a mother. 8 days after their deaths, the Yates children were buried, 5 little coffins, a stunning sight. With 5 hearses parked outside, mourners filled the Clear Lake Church of Christ to hear Rusty Yates talk about his children. Flowers draped the white caskets holding the bodies of Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and baby Mary. Rusty described in great detail each child's personality and leaned on his strong faith to help him through. He did not mention his wife, Andrea Yates, who remained in jail on 24-hour suicide watch. Legal strategies were already being formed.
I think the jury, looking at Andrea, can't imagine how a sane mother would do what Andrea did. And so I think going in, there was a level basis for insanity.
Andrea had attempted suicide twice, was admitted to psychiatric hospitals, and treated for postpartum depression and psychosis before the drownings. Early on, her attorney, George Parham, revealed he was considering an insanity defense. A judge issued a gag order. There were questions about whether the state would seek the death penalty. The following February, her case went to trial.
Our strategy basically was to focus the jurors' attention on the law, both the common sense definitions and how they correlated with the scientific definitions, and to make it a case that was simply, did she know right from wrong?
That was all the state had to prove. Experts agreed that Andrea, with a history of mental illness, suffered from postpartum depression and schizophrenia, but defense and prosecution witnesses disagreed about how severe her illness was or whether it kept her from knowing right from wrong.
We, the jury,
in March, she was convicted. The state wanted death. The jury sentenced her to life in prison. After the verdict, her family said Rusty shared some responsibility. She had little help at home and was in a downward spiral, they said. Testimony revealed Andrea's doctor discontinued the strong antipsychotic medication Haldol just 16 days before she killed her children.
Obviously very disappointed.
Rusty always said he worked hard to get his wife the medical help she needed. He was never charged. He filed for divorce in 2004.
We all stand behind Andrea.
And I'm Tom Cook.
In 2005, more than 2 years into Andrea's life sentence, a bombshell.
Said to be shocked but happy today when she heard that her conviction had been overturned.
We took it all the way up.
An appeals court overturned Andrea's capital murder convictions and ordered a new trial. Joe Omby, now retired and living in Kentucky, was the lead prosecutor.
Park Dietz was our expert on the first case, and he was very well known nationally. And he testified that one of the Law and Order programs had run a program which basically paralleled the situation we were in. And we also had a tidbit of information which we was involved in a case that Andrea Yates habitually watched Law and Order. Park Dietz testified that there had been an episode that kind of paralleled the events that we were trying, and that turned out not to be correct. It was a surprise to me when the testimony came, surprising for one reason, because I had not asked the question and did not expect it to be part of either the direct or the cross-examination. Turned out to be false. Sometime later, during the appeal, the case was overturned because of the incorrect statement.
Thank goodness Dr. Dietz did what he did.
Dietz said he made a mistake, confusing two different Law and Order episodes, and the appeals court also found he did not, quote, intentionally lie. The next year, Andrea entered a not guilty by reason of insanity plea. Judge Belinda Hill granted her a $200,000 bond, but only if she checked herself into Rusk State Hospital in East Texas. George Parnham took a quick detour to his law partner, Wendell Odom's ranch.
I get Andrea and she goes to the fence. And the cows are there, right? Wendell's cows. And she pats one on the head. And we get back in the car. And I take her to Rusk. A lot of people don't know that until now.
In June 2006, Andrea was back in Houston for a second trial. Now 42, she often stared blankly during testimony. Her family was always in attendance. Rusty, now her ex-husband, was there too. A month later, and after 13 hours of deliberations, a jury found that Andrea was insane when she drowned her children and acquitted her of capital murder.
Mental health, I think, has been addressed. That's so important.
Andrea was ordered to a state mental hospital in Kerrville on the edge of the Texas Hill Country, has been home for more than a decade.
She's where she wants to be. She's where she needs to be. And, I mean, hypothetically, where would she go? What would she do?
Here at Kerrville State Hospital, Andrea attends group therapy and one-on-one counseling. She has a job. There are no bars or barbed wire. A green line shows patients the boundaries. Parnham still talks to her on the phone and sometimes visits. In not guilty by reason of insanity, the court has jurisdiction for as long as her sentence would have been. In Andrea's case, that's the rest of her life. She comes up for review every year. Parnham says she has waived it every single time.
I think she's afraid and concerned about being in a community. Certainly, her notoriety and the issues that she brings will cause people to have harshness toward her.
He says she's gotten death threats. Even 20 years later, they've never talked about that day.
Why go there? You know, there's no reason for that.
At 80 years old, George Parnham is still practicing law.
This is a case that will always be in my frontal lobe.
He has supported the Yates Children Memorial Fund to educate people on women's mental health. Andrea's case has brought awareness to mental illness.
This is such a major part of my legal existence. Not only her case, but the aftermath of cases like hers. And I just want juries to understand the mindset, right? That's critical.
Rusty Yates did not respond to our request for an interview. He still lives in the Houston area. He has one child from a second marriage and is now divorced. Andrea turned 57 in July 2021. She has spent almost a third of her life institutionalized. George Parnham says that she is happy. If they had survived, all of the couple's children would have been in their 20s.
Parnham still visits the children's graves and often gets asked what he hopes for Andrea. His answer is simple: whatever makes her comfortable. 20 years later, he remembers her first words to him.
She leaned forward and she said, whispered something, and I had to lean forward to hear what she said. And she said, please don't leave me alone.
We, the jury, find
and
that
that's,
Andrea P. Yates
and I have it.
not guilty by reason of insanity.